The mansion in Veylor Heights was unusually silent that morning. Far too silent for a house with children. And then it happened. A small, fragile sound, so delicate that even the air itself seemed to pause just to listen. "Daddy." Elowen Marcelline froze at the doorway. Her designer handbag slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a soft clack. She was nearly petrified, her deep brown eyes widening, locked onto the scene before her. Her twin daughters, Runa and Perla, children who had never spoken a single word in all 5 years of their existence, were sitting on the soft wool rug. Their sparkling eyes turned toward the man kneeling on the floor. Caelan Veylor, in his faded navy janitorial uniform, work gloves still on his dark brown hands, had his arms open toward the girls. His voice trembled as he whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here." And then the sound came again, clearer, stronger. "Daddy." This time from the other child. In that moment, everything inside Elowen plunged into a void. Her chest tightened, her throat burned dry, her whole body locked in place. Her daughters, born with severe disabilities, unable to walk, unable to speak, were now moving their lips, forming the first word of their lives. A word that shattered every diagnosis the top specialists had ever given. She couldn't breathe. For 5 years, experts from Ardenfall Children's Medical Center had insisted Runa and Perla would never speak. Therapists said their brains couldn't process language. But here, in her own home, the impossible was happening. Her 2 children were calling the janitor Daddy. Kalin had no idea Elowen was standing there. His eyes were gentle, focused on the girls. His warm voice soft, as if any louder sound might cause the fragile moment to dissolve. "Sweetheart, say it again," he coaxed gently. Elowen's heart sank to the very bottom. She had spent millions of dollars on hospitals, therapies, machines, and doctors. She had prayed quietly and cried in places where no one could see her. Her husband Alistair had died in a plane crash when the girls were only 3 months old. Since that day, she had tried to turn this house into something solid, orderly, structured, anything that would keep the grief from leaking through. Yet a single word had broken everything. She stepped back slowly before anyone could notice she'd been there. The door closed behind her with a soft sound, but the word Daddy clung to her mind like a ghost, refusing to leave. Elowen walked down the long hallway. Her heels touched the marble floor without making a sound, just like she herself. Beautiful, but silent for many years. The tall cream-colored walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, all smiling, while the house itself remained cold. She entered her office and sat at the large oak desk. Her fingers touched her familiar signing pen, but her mind couldn't hold on to anything. All she could see was the image of her daughters reaching toward Kalin, their eyes filled with a vibrancy she had never witnessed. She had lived in silence for too long. When Alistair was alive, the house overflowed with laughter. He sang in the garage, told stories at dinner, hummed melodies when Runa and Perla were still in her womb. But after he died, she replaced laughter with rules, music with control. She believed that if she kept everything tight enough, she wouldn't shatter again. But now something inside her was cracking. Not pain, something she didn't have a name for. She leaned back, staring up at the ceiling, trying to convince herself she might have misheard. Maybe the girls hadn't really spoken. Maybe it was just meaningless noise. But no. She had heard it clearly, not once, but twice. Elowen stood and walked to the window. From the second floor, she could see the vast garden below, once designed to be filled with joy. But the swings had never been pushed. The grass held no tiny footprints. Toys remained tucked in their boxes year after year. She had created a world that was correct but not alive. And then Caelan Veylor had appeared. He'd arrived 3 weeks earlier. The management company said he was hardworking, quiet, and reliable. Originally from the east side of Ardenfall, with experience in several hospitals and care centers. Elowen had barely spoken to him, only glimpsed him in corners of the hallways, cleaning or humming softly. He was meant to be invisible among a large staff. But the girls noticed him. Nurses had said, "The girls follow his voice. They're calmer when he's around." Elowen had dismissed all of it. She assumed everyone was imagining the beautiful things they wished were true, the way people cling to the tiniest hope when they've been desperate long enough. Now she didn't know what to believe. Elowen put her hands over her face and exhaled. What did he do to them? How did he do it? She walked down the hall toward the care room. The door was slightly open. Inside, Kalin sat on the floor, the twins asleep beside him. He was writing something in a brown notebook, head slightly bowed, humming a slow melody. Elowen didn't enter. She simply watched. Runa and Perla breathed steadily, their faces peaceful. One of them twitched slightly, as if a dream brushed softly across her cheek. Kalin gently tucked the blanket around her. Every movement was tender, as if each touch carried meaning. He didn't look like Alistair. Alistair had been tall, with a sharp jawline and confident stride, the classic, successful businessman. Kalin was shorter, leaner, with close-cropped hair, deep brown skin weathered by hard work, and the tired face of a man who had endured too much. Yet somehow, the feeling he brought into the room was exactly what Alistair used to bring. Warmth, life, presence. Elowen's throat tightened. She turned away before Kalin noticed and returned to her bedroom. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lying in the darkness, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the mansion suddenly sharpened. The ticking clock, the faint whistle of air through the vents, the rustling leaves outside the window. And beneath all those sounds, one word refused to leave her mind. Daddy. It wasn't just a word. It was a door opening towards something she thought she had lost forever. Elowen shot upright, her body trembling slightly. She whispered into the darkness, "Alistair, if you can hear me, what is happening to our children?" There was no answer, only the sound of her own heavy breathing. But she knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, she had to speak to Kalin. She needed to understand what he had done and why her daughters had found their voices in the arms of a stranger. The following morning, Elowen sat at the dining table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Staff moved quietly around the room, each one careful not to disturb their employer. Something in the house felt different, as if something invisible had shifted during the night. When Kalin walked in carrying a tray of fresh towels and cleaning supplies, Elowen slowly lifted her gaze. His calm expression barely changed. "Good morning, Mrs. Marcelline," he said softly. Elowen didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice hovered between curiosity and doubt. "May I speak with you for a moment?" He stopped beside the table. "Yes, ma'am." Elowen gestured for him to sit, but Kalin didn't. He remained standing, his hands folded neatly in front of his apron, his posture steady. She studied him in silence for a long moment, as though trying to find something in his face, something she herself couldn't name yet. Finally, Elowen spoke, her voice careful, lower. "I saw what happened yesterday. The room seemed to go still. I heard them speak." Kalin's eyes softened. He didn't look surprised. "Yes, ma'am. They said, 'Daddy.'" Elowen continued, her words falling out slowly. Both of them. How did you make them do that? Kalin glanced at his hands for a brief moment, then looked back up. I didn't make them do anything, ma'am. They did it on their own. Elowen leaned forward. You must have done something. You sang or said something special. My children have been silent since they were born. The best doctors in Ardenfall couldn't help them. So what did you do? Kalen's tone remained steady, unchanged. I talk to them every day, ma'am. I read to them. I sing. And I hold their hands when they're scared. Maybe finally they felt safe enough to respond. Elowen's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Safe? She repeated, almost to herself. She bowed her head slightly, shaking it. You think that's all it takes? Safety? After all the money, all the therapies, you're telling me that feeling safe is enough? Caelan didn't argue. He simply replied gently, Sometimes that's all children need, ma'am. Someone who doesn't give up on them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows, sending a low, steady rhythm through the room. Elowen rose to her feet, her voice firming. You were hired to clean, not to teach. Don't do anything with my children without telling me first. Caelan bowed his head, nodding respectfully. Yes, ma'am. He lifted the tray and left the room. Elowen remained where she was, eyes fixed on the empty space where the door had just closed. His calm voice echoed in her mind. Someone who doesn't give up on them. That afternoon, Elowen asked Nurse Jasenia Roan to bring the twins to the playroom. She wanted to see it for herself. Jasenia rolled Runa and Perla into the room, each strapped into her small support chair. Their eyes drifted around the empty space. Hello, my loves, Elowen said, trying to keep her voice soft. It's Mommy. Neither child moved. She stepped closer. Can you hear Mommy? She asked gently. Still silence. A sharp ache pierced Elowen's chest. She took another step and touched Runa's tiny hand. It was warm and soft. But the little girl didn't react. Jasenia spoke quietly behind her. They've been silent all day, ma'am. Caelan is usually with them in the mornings, but today he was cleaning in the West Wing. Call him here, Elowen said, almost reflexively. A few minutes later, Caelan entered. His uniform was slightly damp from work, the yellow gloves tucked into his apron pocket. He stepped in carefully, avoiding direct eye contact with Elowen. When Runa saw him, her expression changed instantly. Her tiny fingers twitched against the armrest. Perla's head slowly turned toward Caelan. Caelan smiled, his voice lowering. Hi, sweetheart, he whispered. Both girls blinked at the same time, then gave a faint, soft smile. One Elowen had never seen directed at her before. Caelan knelt between their chairs and began humming a gentle, slow melody. It wasn't a song Elowen recognized, just a simple, soothing tune. Runa made a tiny sound in her throat, as if trying to imitate him. Perla's hand stretched out just a bit farther. Elowen's eyes widened. Do you see that? She whispered to Jasenia, her voice nearly breathless. Jasenia nodded, whispering back, They've never done that with anyone else, ma'am. Caelan looked up, his expression still calm. You see, ma'am? They can respond. They just need time, not pressure. Elowen felt something shifting inside her, clearly, unmistakably. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Her throat tightened again, but this time, it wasn't anger. After a long silence, she managed only one sentence. You may stay with them for the entire afternoon. Caelan nodded, replying softly, Yes, ma'am. Elowen turned to leave the room, but just as she reached the doorway, she stopped. She looked back one more time. Kalin sat on the floor between the twins, still humming softly. Runa moved her fingers to the rhythm. Perla tilted her head slightly, her eyes half closed, her face relaxed and peaceful. Elowen stood there quietly and realized a simple, painful truth. Right now, her children didn't need another doctor. They only needed to be truly seen. And Kalin was the one who had seen them. That night, Elowen sat in her office again. The rain had stopped, leaving only the faint hum of the house in the darkness. She whispered to herself, "What is he doing that all of us have missed?" The next day, Elowen couldn't stop thinking about Kalin. Who was he? Why did he care so deeply about two children he had only met a few weeks ago? And most importantly, how could he understand exactly what her daughters needed when an entire team of specialists had failed? On Wednesday morning, she decided to find out. Elowen called the staffing agency that had referred Kalin. "I need the complete file of Caelan Veylor, every position he's ever held, the reasons he left, and all references." An hour later, her inbox received a thick PDF document. Elowen sat in her office, poured herself a cup of hot tea, and opened the file. Caelan Veylor, age 38, born in East Ardenfall. Employment history: maintenance staff at Ardenfall Children's Medical Center, 4 years. Janitorial staff at Evergreen Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, 2 years. Family status: divorced. One daughter, Delia Veylor, 5 years old. Single parent since 2022. Comments from previous employers: reliable, hardworking, extremely patient with children. Frequently volunteers to help disabled children during breaks. His daughter has special medical needs. Elowen stopped at the last line. His daughter also had special needs. She opened the attached document, a medical summary Kalin had allowed the employer to view. Delia Veylor, diagnosed with quadriplegic cerebral palsy, nonverbal, limited mobility. Elowen set her teacup down. Her hand trembled slightly. Kalin wasn't just a janitor who happened to be good with children. He was a father, fighting every day against the same things she herself was facing. He understood, not from textbooks, not from courses. He understood through the pain and love of his own life. A wave of emotion crashed over her. Guilt, shame, and something else: deep gratitude. She had seen him as a worker, a pair of hands, someone invisible. But he was so much more. That afternoon, she drove to his neighborhood. It was a working-class area with old 3-story buildings and peeling paint. She parked outside and looked up at the second-floor apartment, Unit 2B. Kalin's home. She didn't intend to go inside. She simply sat in the car, feeling like an intruder, yet unable to leave. 10 minutes later, she saw him. Kalin stepped out onto the balcony, pushing a small wheelchair. Delia sat in it, brown skin glowing in the afternoon light, natural hair tied neatly, wearing a pink dress with butterfly prints. He knelt down, positioning the wheelchair so his daughter could look out at the yard. He pointed downward, perhaps at a bird or the drifting afternoon clouds. Delia smiled, a tilted, imperfect smile, but full of joy. Kalin bent forward, kissed the top of her head, then began singing. Elowen couldn't hear the words, but she saw his lips moving, saw Delia trying to mimic him bit by bit. A simple moment. A father, a disabled child, an old balcony. But to Elowen, it was everything. She understood now. This was why he knew how to speak to Runa and Perla. He had been speaking this way to Delia every single day. Elowen's throat tightened. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear slid down her cheek. Kalin wasn't helping because of money. He was helping because he understood. And maybe because he still believed in something she had lost long ago, miracles. The following week changed everything. On a stormy night, the power went out. The wind howled, rain hammered the windows, and thunder shook the entire house. In the care room, Runa and Perla began to cry. Real crying, panicked, terrified. Elowen rushed to them, holding Runa tight. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." But the girls kept sobbing. Then suddenly, Runa released a sound unlike anything Elowen had ever heard. It wasn't just a cry, it was a word. "Caleb." Elowen froze. Perla began too. "Caleb." They were calling him. In their terror, the person they wanted was not their mother. It was Kalin. Elowen's heart fractured, not out of jealousy or anger, but because she finally understood something deep and painful. She grabbed her phone and dialed Kalin. "The girls, they're calling your name. They're terrified. I don't know what to do." There was a brief silence. Then he said, "Can you put the phone near them? Let me talk to them." She set the phone between the cribs and turned on the speaker. Kalin's voice came through, low, warm, familiar, even distorted by the storm. "Runa, Perla, it's Kalin. It's okay, sweethearts. The storm will pass. Mommy is right there with you. She loves you very much." The crying slowed. Kalin began singing the lullaby through the phone. The sound was scratchy, but the melody was clear, gentle, steady, comforting, just like always. Runa calmed. Perla calmed. Their eyes fluttered, then closed. Their breathing steadied. Elowen sat down on the floor, tears pouring down her face. She listened to Kalin sing through the storm and realized a truth that was both painful and beautiful. Love isn't measured by blood. It's measured by who shows up when the child needs them most. When the song ended, the girls were fast asleep. Elowen picked up the phone. "Kalin." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And you're a good mother, Mrs. Marcelline. You just need to believe that." Those words pierced her, not to hurt, but to awaken. The next morning, Elowen made a decision that would change everything. She found Kalin in the laundry room. "Kalin, I want to ask you something, and you have every right to refuse." "Please go ahead, ma'am." "I want you to move, in here, with Dahlia." Kalin froze, clearly stunned. Elowen spoke quickly. "In the West Wing, there's a row of rooms that used to be for guests. 3 bedrooms, a private living room, and a small kitchen. You and Dahlia could live there, rent-free, and I'll double your salary." She paused, then continued more slowly. "But not because of the money. Not because I want to buy your dedication. But because—" Her voice suddenly tightened. It took her a few seconds to go on. "Because my girls need you. They need someone they trust. And I think Dahlia deserves better care too. We have professional nurses here, medical equipment, safe spaces for her to play." She held his gaze. "You help me care for Runa and Perla, and I help you care for Dahlia. We do that as a family." The word family left her lips with difficulty, but Elowen said it with all the sincerity she had. Kalin's eyes turned red. He turned his face to the side and wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. For a long moment, he couldn't speak at all. At last, his voice came, hoarse. "You don't have to do this, ma'am." "I know," Elowen replied softly. "But I want to, because you deserve it. Dahlia deserves it. And my daughters, they deserve someone who will never give up on them." Kalin looked straight at her. His eyes were wet, filled with a deep emotion, gratitude, tenderness, and also the fear of responsibility. "I need to think about it," he said slowly. "For Dahlia, I have to be sure this is the right thing for her. I don't want her to feel confused, feel like we're taking advantage of your kindness. Elowen nodded. I understand. Take as much time as you need. 3 days later, Kalin came to see her in the office. Mrs. Marcelline, may I speak with you for a moment? Of course. This time, he actually sat. To Elowen, that alone felt like half an answer. I talked to Dahlia, he said. I told her about Runa and Perla, about this house, and about your offer. Elowen waited in silence, her heart beating faster than usual. Dahlia asked me. His voice caught. Daddy, are they like me too? I said yes, they're like you. Then she asked, so can I play with them? Tears rushed to Elowen's eyes. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth. Kalen's eyes were red too. She's only 5, ma'am, and in her whole life, she's never had a real friend. No child understands her. He took a deep breath, then looked straight at Elowen. So, if you still want us, we'll move in. But I have one condition. What is it? Elowen asked immediately, almost unable to breathe. I won't take double pay. I'll only accept my current salary plus the housing. Because I don't want to feel like I'm being paid to become part of the girls' lives. I want it to feel like this is really a family. Elowen stepped closer to him, and for the first time, she embraced Kalin. Not the way a boss hugs an employee, but the way 2 wounded people do. 2 people trying to believe in something larger than themselves, larger than money, titles, or contracts. Welcome home, Kalin, she whispered. 1 week later, Kalin and Dahlia moved in. On a warm afternoon, Elowen stood at the front door, watching his old car drive up the estate's entrance. Kalin got out first, then opened the back door and carefully lifted Dahlia's wheelchair out. The little girl looked up at the large house with big, round eyes, both shy and curious. Her dark brown skin glowed in the afternoon sun. Elowen walked down the steps. She lowered herself, kneeling to be at Dahlia's eye level. Hi, Dahlia. You're Dahlia, right? The girl nodded slightly, a bit shy. My name is Elowen, and I'm very happy you're here. Runa and Perla are waiting for you inside. Dahlia's eyes lit up. Oopie. She tried to form the sound. Elowen smiled, her eyes stinging again. That's right, sweetheart. Runa, you're doing so well. She stood and turned to Kalin. Are you ready? He nodded, a small but steady smile on his face. Yes, ma'am. We're ready? They stepped through the doorway together, and for the first time in 5 years, the Marcelline Manor was no longer just a place filled with memories of loss. It had become the beginning of a new family. In the weeks that followed, the mansion transformed. Laughter echoed through hallways that had been silent for years. Dahlia's wheelchair rolled alongside Runa and Perla's, 3 little girls who understood each other in ways no one else could. Elowen found herself spending more time in the care room, not just watching, but participating. She learned the songs Kalin sang. She practiced the patience he demonstrated. She discovered that her daughters didn't need perfection from her. They just needed her presence. One evening, as the sun set over Veylor Heights, Elowen sat on the floor with all 3 children. Kalin was beside her, reading from a picture book. Runa made a sound, clear and intentional. Ma-ama. Elowen's heart stopped. She looked at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. Did you hear that? She whispered. Kalin smiled. I heard it. Perla joined in, her voice tiny but unmistakable. Ma-ma-ma. Elowen gathered both girls into her arms, crying and laughing at the same time. Dahlia watched with wide eyes, then reached out to touch Elowen's hand. In that moment, Elowen understood something profound. She had spent years building walls, walls of money, structure, and control. She thought they would protect her from pain. Instead, they had only isolated her from love. Kalin had shown her another way, not through grand gestures or expensive solutions, but through simple, consistent presence. Through patience, through the radical belief that love could reach even the most unreachable places. She looked at him, this humble man in his faded uniform, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Hope. That night, after the children were asleep, Elowen and Kalin sat on the back porch, watching the stars emerge over Ardenfall. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up. On them. On me." Kalin was silent for a moment. Then he said, "When Dahlia was diagnosed, I thought my life was over. I thought I had failed as a father before I even started. But then I realized she didn't need me to fix her. She just needed me to love her, exactly as she was." He looked at Elowen. "Your daughters are the same. They don't need to be fixed. They just need to be loved." Elowen nodded, understanding fully for the first time. "And what about you?" she asked softly. "What do you need?" Kalin smiled, that same gentle, patient smile. "I think I already found it." The air between them shifted. Something unspoken passed between two people who had both known loss, both known struggle, both learned that the most precious things in life cannot be bought. Elowen reached out and took his hand. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Sometimes love doesn't come from the people we expect. Sometimes it enters our lives quietly, through the hands of someone who simply refuses to let go. Kalin was not a doctor. He was not a therapist. He was just a humble janitor. Yet he carried within him a heart overflowing with tenderness. And with that very heart, he returned a voice to two children who had been trapped in silence their entire lives. And Elowen, a woman who once believed that money could fix everything, learned that love cannot be bought. Healing does not always come from medicine or modern methods. It comes from presence, from patience, and from the simplest acts of care. This story reminds us that sometimes the people who seem the smallest and most ordinary are the very ones who carry the brightest light. And sometimes, just one small act of love can change a life forever.